Hello. Welcome to another cruiser inspection in World of Warships. Maybe a re-inspection. But I've been playing a lot of Lighthouse cruisers recently on the Twitch stream. And I've been kind of getting back into a bit of Lighthouse Moskva gameplay. Lighthouse Moskva is something I've kind of played a bit in the past. And then kind of mostly under the value of having one commander build on Kuznetsov. Kind of never really went back to it all that much, right? Because, retraining for a Lighthouse build on Moskva that might not work on Stalingrad is a bit of a suspect proposition every time you want to play Moskva. However, I've been just kind of fucking around recently. And I've got to say, I'm getting close to the conclusion that Lighthouse is how you should play Moskva. I'm not 100% on it's the objectively best way to build Moskva. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm actually getting there. The more games that I play in it, so why do you play Lighthouse Moskva? Why do you play any cruiser in a Lighthouse version? Well, typically speaking, there's a few criteria you want to meet for a cruiser to be useful in a Lighthouse build. Okay. Number one is you want it to be like a DPM focused ship, right? That shoots either HE or SAP, because the heavy HE, heavy SAP skill obviously is not applying to your AP. So you can take, heavy AP, heavy SAP, heavy HE on an all AP focused ship, but then you're just kind of spending 3 captain points to, gimp the concealment, right? So I would say the first criteria is, we're mostly an HE or a SAP spammer. That's what Moskva is. It does use AP, maybe a bit more than some cruisers, because the AP is very good, but most of the time you're shooting HE at people. 2, when you build for full Lighthouse, that is not taking concealment on the upgrade slot and not taking concealment on the captain and nerfing your concealment with heavy HE, you want your gun range with reload mod, not with range mod, but with reload mod, to be pretty close to your concealment range. It's okay if your gun range is a bit more than your concealment. It's okay if your gun range is a bit less than your concealment, but you want to be pretty close, right? You don't, there's not that much value in building like a super stealthy cruiser for Lighthouse, and then like you almost never get to actually activate the top grade gunner, which is kind of like the whole point, or most of the point of a Lighthouse build is you're kind of cringing that extra 8% DPM that top grade gunner gives you, right? So I'd say that's, the first 2 criteria. And then I would say the third is you have to have some kind of well above average survivability, right? So, the cruiser that's most famous probably in this game for a Lighthouse spec is Henry. Henry is mostly an HE spammer. Henry gets very comparable concealment and main gun range when you build Lighthouse. And of course, Henry has massively improved survivability over the majority of cruisers because of how well it, speed jukes. It's pretty fucking hard to hit, beyond about 15 kilometers, right? Well, Moskva is not really hard to hit, right? I mean, even if you're building like steering gears or something, I mean, the ship is a brick, right? So, but it does have substantially improved survivability just because of the hull and the armor, right? If you're not flat to people in Moskva, yes, a lot of bad BB players cope about Russian cruisers being unkillable. Moskva dies to every BB in the game at close range, basically. But if you're playing in the 15 plus kilometer range, where BBs aren't, reliably clicking half their salvo into your upper bow and superstructure, Moskva is exceptionally tanky, right? The tankiness obviously like falls apart in very close range situations. So, and then I would say, so, that's kind of the criteria to me is, you're mostly an HE spammer. You can get comparable gun range and concealment range. You have some kind of improved survivability. And then I would say the last one is you can't really be giving up something really valuable, some really valuable ability that your ship has, by nerfing your concealment super far, right? So it's why, I consider personally Salem to be objectively correctly built as a lighthouse cruiser. I actually don't really think there's even a point in playing Salem if you play full concealment build. I actually think it doesn't even make sense to do that. Because you're not really giving up utility in Salem. You kind of can't really ever radar anything anyway, right? Whereas in Des Moines, you are giving up the ability. You don't have stealth radar in Des Moines, but you have a .9 km detect gap between your radar and your detection. It's pretty good, right? So Moskva is a radar cruiser, and if it was something like Des Moines where you have 10-9 conceal and 10 km radar, then that would be kind of a big thing to give up by gimping your concealment so much. But a Moskva doesn't even kind of have close to stealth radar, right? I mean, we're talking I believe you can get Moskva concealment down to 14.1 with a standard build. It's either 14 or 14.1. I can't really remember. But you're not giving up any ambushing potential really at all by nerfing Moskva's concealment range. And you also don't really outspot like a single battleship. I mean, there's some super BBs, right? Like, yeah, you'll outspot like Maine, and I guess you'll outspot like GK and Preußen with a full conceal build, but not really enough to matter. Um, and honestly, in this day and age, a ton of BBs outspot Moskva heavily anyway. So, kind of meeting all of the criteria in my mind. And that's why Moskva to me is kind of one of there's not that many cruisers in tier 10 that I'm even close to saying are objectively best as a lighthouse. Salem and Goliath, certainly. I mean, you see their Columbo moment, 20k into a perfectly bowed Moskva. This is what I mean by you're not tanky at all at close range, right? If he was shooting me at 18 kilometers, he'd probably be doing well under half that kind of damage, just RNG. But, at this kind of range, you're just going to get clicked, right? So, we're pumping some AP into this guy. But anyway, suffice it to say that really to me, Moskva is one of very few tier 10 cruisers that you can make a case for being objectively superior in the lighthouse role. And I guess that's for a couple of reasons that I think it's objectively superior. One, your tankiness is kind of only really a factor at longer ranges, right? Um, and another thing that's going on with Moskva is, like I said, you don't really ambush anything ever, so you're not really giving up any kind of game impact in most lobbies by nerfing your concealment, right? Now, this is very different to something like, say, Castilla or Condi is another example, right? I typically play Henry with Lighthouse, but Condi with full conceal. And that's because of the bursts that those cruisers have, where they're like almost guaranteed to dev strike broadside cruisers. And if you build for no concealment, then you never really get to utilize that ability, right? But Moskva is a positionally based cruiser, right? Moskva is not. I mean, you can HE kite farm in Moskva. You can kite in Moskva, but most of the time in Moskva, you're going to be aggressively pushing to an island that allows a lot of radar coverage. You see here on the map north, we cover, all of two caps plus a bit of the flank, right? We basically zone out almost half the playable area on the map with our radar. And going full concealment to play this style of Moskva gameplay, I mean, if you think about it, doesn't really make any sense, right? Like, what is the point of having, I would say good, but really the concealment on Moskva is terrible, right? What is the point of getting the concealment on Moskva down to 14 kilometers if you're just going to play positionally anyway, right? So that would be number one. And then the other alternative is you're on a wide ass open flank in Moskva. What is the benefit of having, say, 14-kilometer concealment instead of 20-kilometer concealment? Well, really, the only theoretical benefit, because you're not ever radaring DDs that aren't Lobotoc, right? I mean, DDs see you coming for over a minute before you can radar them. So you're not like surprising destroyers with your 14 cam conceal 12 km radar. So really the value of getting the concealment down to 14 is just like if you start getting focus and you start trying to run away, you can theoretically run far enough away that you actually get dark, right? That would be like the idea of concealment. Now, for people who love kiting, and say probably kite and say something like a Moskva, then I'm sure that that 14 km D-Tech they can get their Moskva down to feels better for them. Uh, but when you're an aggressive bot, um, who is a slave to DPM, who just is obsessed with game impact, getting people to shoot at you, playing positionally, all of these things. The fact that you're never going to outspot anything anyway with full conceal Moskva, you're never going to outspot something and therefore like catch it by surprise and smash it with AP, right? Every cruiser in the game sees you coming a mile away, right? Um, I've got to say, it's especially as I've gotten a little bit better over the years at playing cruisers, it's like I've almost completely not cared about that survivability. Now, on something like a Stalingrad, I do care because Stalingrad dies significantly faster than Moskva dies. Um, Part of it's the shape of the hull a little bit, but mostly it's just that if you start getting HE spammed, you just get cooked in something like Stalingrad, right? Moskva only takes 30-second fires, it takes cruiser duration fires. So, and Moskva is exceptionally tanky, specifically at longer range. So, to me, there's really two things that are happening in a Moskva game. One is, as you saw for the first 10 minutes of this game, I'm parked on an island in the middle of the map trying to be a utility slave. No value to having better concealment, right? No value. And then the other thing that's happening is I'm at very long range, say 17 to 20 kilometers, and I'm HE spamming battleships and cruisers. Well, I don't care about being stealthy in that situation because that's the kind of range where like nothing really damages you in Moskva, right? Yeah, that BB might get a god tier RNG salvo and like 15 KU, but like typically speaking at those kind of ranges, Montana shoots your Moskva at 19 kilometers, right? He might get 5 to 10K, right? He shoots you at 10 kilometers, he might get 25K, right? That's a different story. Um, and so dropping these skills is, allowing us to build into DPM, especially HEDPM, getting the HEDPM of Moskva fairly respectably high. Um, Terrible aim. Ignore that one. We're over 200k base HEDPM. When you factor in the railguns, the fire starting, the fire chance, and the HE pen, that's incredibly respectable. Um, and then of course Moskva has like pretty damn just solid in general AP DPM already. Um, so to kind of go into this game we played utility, we played tank role on the island. We burned through all of our heals. We burned through all of our radar. Um, and now the reason why we went around southeast around this island to fight the Rhode Island is, of course, we don't want to be pushing north and then we're in a Shikishima crossfire the whole time, right? This game is basically fucked. The points are reversed, so our team is down 400 points. So I need to kill the Rhode Island, and then I need to go middle, and I need to not lose much HP. But fortunately for me, this guy is just showing me belly. By turning in, what he's doing is he's rolling his citadel up out of the water, and Rhode Island has kind of like a waterline citadel, so he's making it well above water, and that's why we're just like magically nuking this man out of nowhere. Um, so we've brought it back a little bit. We're in a 3v4, and we have 2 caps. So if our team can kill the Z42 and not lose either of these 2 ships at B, all of a sudden it's moderately winnable, right? I'm going to try to sit here and farm the Shikishima. If my YY and my Brisbane can kill the Z42, then all of a sudden we've kind of got a game on our hands, right? The biggest issue is that I don't have a lot of HP. That's kind of like the number one problem that I have here. The Shikishima is very, very healthy, and I am very unhealthy. So that's why I'm trying to greed all the guns on him, right? I want the full effect of the DPM, but and at this kind of range, or not at this kind of range, but at this kind of HP that I'm on with this Lighthouse build, the Moskva DPM with this much adrenaline rush kicking in is like very, very respectable. On this like 25% HP, we're getting close to like 250k HEDPM when shooting all of our guns on target, which is like quite respectable. Obviously, like I said, factoring the railguns. And I think maybe I made a mistake here, but I thought at the time when I died, because I ended up dying pushing the Shikishima, I thought maybe I made a mistake by pushing. I thought, oh, I probably should have sat on that rock and farmed him. But looking back on it, he was going to get dark, and our Brisbane was no longer going to be able to spot him. So, at the time I made this play, I was thinking, okay, Shikishima won't be spotted by my teammates, and it's better if he shoots me once or twice in my Moskva than if he shoots my Brisbane once or twice, right? So, um, we're pushing in, and basically what's going to happen is he's just going to get really god tier RNG, and we're going to die. I'm at 9,000 HP. We're pushing in. We are only at 9 kilometers, right? But with a saturated bow, this guy should have to hit us with, basically he needs about 3 full pens to kill me here. And I'm staying on HE because, I'm hoping even if I die, we get a permafire maybe at the end. But uh, somehow those shells all fuse on my superstructure. If you notice, none of those even hit the bow. They all hit side plating for bounces or superstructure. And he somehow ends up getting like over 10,000 damage with that salvo, which is kind of sad because we actually probably would have killed him and lived if that one last salvo had not hit us, and we could have won this game. But unfortunate, and that's kind of Moskva's tankiness obviously falling apart, combined obviously with this guy getting god tier RNG rolls, the game randomly fusing shells that hit like the conning tower of a cruiser. Um, but very close, right? I mean, very, very, very close. Literally just living that one salvo, which we almost did. I think if one less shell had counted as a pen, we would have lived. We would have killed the Shikishima, had a decent chance of winning the game. Um, but I want you to kind of think about what happened during this game and ask: was the was the shitty concealment ever a problem? Now, I would argue the way that this game shaped up, it kind of just didn't matter, right? Um, Having top grade gunner kicking in at almost 20 kilometers probably didn't matter, right? All of our fights were like people in my mouth for the most part, right? Um, but that's kind of my point, is that even in a game where the Lighthouse build isn't really improving your damage output, right? It's not really improving my damage output there. Kind of, because heavy HE is still improving my DPM by 10%, right? But the top grade gunner part of the equation isn't mattering. And my point is that even in a game like this, and we're going to look at the next game, these are back-to-back games as always. In the next game, the top grade gunner is going to matter. And the point that I'm getting at is I probably played the day of recording this 8 to 10 games in Lighthouse Moskva. And I can honestly say there was just not one game where I was like, I trolled myself by not getting my concealment down to 14 km. I truly don't think one of my 8 or 10 games I felt that way. And we're going to hop straight into the second replay. And the second game that we're looking at is going to represent, I would say, about the other half of the games. That first replay, I think these were games like 3 and 4 of the 8 or 10 games that I played the day of recording this. But I would say about that last replay, that was about half of my games where it just didn't matter, plus or minus, right? Having horrible concealment didn't matter because I was positionally based on an island. Having the top grade gunner buff didn't matter because all the fights were in my mouth. We benefited from the HEDPM, obviously, but that's about it, right? The only time we were really benefiting from the Lighthouse build that last game was shooting HE, so you're just getting 10% DPM buff there, obviously. Now, this game represented probably about the other half, where we actually got to make very, very good use of the top grade gunner skill at max range. And the way I'm playing is, again, I want to stress the reason why I'm saying things like I don't miss the 14 km concealment, I don't think it matters. That has to do with how I'm playing the bow, right? Like, if I was trying to play a much more cautious, passive, safer style, I would obviously appreciate the better concealment, right? Like pushing up to this island, I would probably not yet be spotted. But then, if I wanted to shoot these guys, which I would, like, why would I not take shots at Vyazma and Bismarck across the map, right? It's free damage. They're not going to do much damage back to me if they shoot at me, right? Um, but at this range, top grade gunner is kicking in. So we're at 18% more HEDPM than we would be with a traditional Moskva build, right? Um, and this is kind of like the goal, like the real value of the Lighthouse build on Moskva, in my opinion, is like pushing a flank in a kind of isolated situation, um, and getting the fights to happen at longer range. Because the closer that the fights happen to you in Moskva, same with Petro and Stalingrad, obviously, the less that tanky hull really benefits you. So we've made it to our island. I'm hitting the radar early because I just want to know if anyone's going to be, torping me on the flank. You see that they have Shima, Hull, Fletcher, Pavorny. Um, the Pavorny and I think the Shima weren't spotted at the time we radared. So this Vyasma is going to be the average, Vajasma player, as we say, and just go perfectly flat to a Moskva at 10 kilometers with, what is basically a Stalingrad hull. So, very, very, very cool. Much appreciated. And, this second game that we're looking at. Okay, listen. Did I personally write checks to half the enemy team? I might have. I'll have to probably check the checking account after this one. There's some pretty shocking play by the red team. I mean, honestly, shocking play by both teams. But if you notice back, let's open up the matchmaker again. We are top tier, and it must be said, I say things like Moskva's not that tanky at closer range because battleships can just click it, but I'll acknowledge when the battleships are Bismarck, FDG, Iowa, Montana's on the other side of the map. Yeah, Moskva's pretty tanky even at point blank range. But so I mean, this is kind of the idea, right? Is we're on a flank, we're playing, pretty aggressive to get in a good position. We're kind of isolating our fights to, I would say at most we want to isolate our fights to like a 1v2, 1v3. At this kind of range, right? Like this Bismarck is not going to do meaningful damage to me at 18 kilometers. Now, if he's in my mouth, he might do meaningful damage, but at this kind of range, not a chance. And then this is our Lighthouse build, just giving us a flat 18% DPM buff, right? And again, I want to stress, like, probably a solid half the games I'm playing in Lighthouse Moskva are games like this. You get to the flank, your top grade gunner skill is buffing your DPM like the entire duration of the game, like, and it's going to be responsible for a pretty respectable amount of damage. Kind of lower than you would think base XP ending up being this game because we're in a top tier lobby. But then again, also doing the kind of damage that we're going to end up doing in a lobby with this many low tier ships is also kind of crazy. But it's just free damage basically. And I feel like the boat just makes more sense in more situations when you have the DPM Lighthouse build. Because the Moskva HEDPM is not terrible, but it's not like the highest, right? It's nowhere close to Des Moines. So by getting your DPM up to what's about 200 and I think 220k base HEDPM, all of a sudden it just feels like you're doing damage to people. It's a very noticeable. That 18% improved DPM on Moskva feels to me very, very noticeable, and it incentivizes you to play a little more isolated, a little more open, a little more tank, battleship almost role, like tanking for your team more. And kind of like with Goliath, playing Lighthouse Goliath benefits your team way more than playing Concealment Goliath. Same thing with Lighthouse DPM Salem, right? These ships just kind of give your team a ton of extra value because they build into the strengths that your ship naturally has. And the same thing is true of Moskva, because you're either going to play, you notice we started this game, we're on an island, right? We're locking down the flank, we're spamming at super, super long range, and now we're going to play the positional hold game. These BBs were last spotted running away that are now all coming back, right? So we've got 2 DDs, 3 BBs, and a Des Moines, basically within 13, 14 kilometers of us. So we need to back up. Because if all 3 battleships get to focus me at the same time, probably just not going to live that, right? Probably not going to fucking live that. And we also don't want to get torped by the DDs. So we want these guys to have to invest like a lot in order to torpedo me. So we want to immediately back up. And I'm spamming at the Iowa kind of for the sole reason that neither of these guys were flat to me, and he doesn't have an icebreaker. So we pen the bow with HE. Now that the Bismarck's flat, we're just going to go for the Bismarck, right? Because Moskva AP DPM is pretty fucking solid, even front guns only. It's a lot of damage. Like, 6 to 10k salvos, the front guns definitely can happen when the dispersion cooperates, and you're shooting, with this build, like on 2/3 HP, right? We're down to a 7.5 second reload. So the kind of damage we'll pump into this Bismarck is like very extreme. But you see here, like I'm backing up because I'm trying to make it as much of a 1v1 as I can, right? And I can't really because the Iowa's sending on me. But he doesn't really seem to know where to shoot me. He's kind of just shooting like belt and superstructure. So the Bismarck's angling in. He's going to shoot two, front gun Bismarck at me, so we don't care about his damage output anymore. Iowa's showing a bit too much broadside, so we can, go for like the scalloped bow kind of a deal. And then you see also this other Bismarck is coming, right? If you just notice that, he was coming this way. So the reason why I'm accelerating is I'm trying to get a little closer to the island, hopefully, which makes him have to come out slightly farther to hit me. But the problem is if this Iowa keeps rushing to my right, then I can no longer use the island to cut off me and the other Bismarck. Or sorry, me and the FDG. I'm Jingles moment. This guy is just going way too broadside. I mean, Moskva AP has a ton of pen. So we're getting a ton of citadels on this guy. And I mostly hit the radar thinking that the Fletcher was like near B. I'll be honest. I actually had no idea that he was there. That was kind of one of those, I might as well hit the radar because I'm probably dead here, right? Use your concept, guys. Concept. Using your utility when you think you're going to die because maybe a teammate will get some advantage from it. And look at that. I'm actually selfishly rewarded with an extra kill. Unfortunately, I don't get the kill on the Iowa there, but, it's whatever. Sherman's helping us, which is good. And now it's me and versus a Bismarck and a Freddy, like... I don't want to say they're never going to win this, because you never know. If these guys both know to aim bow and get a god tier dispersion salvo, they could make it happen. And this Freddy has a ton of HP, but like, realistically, man, he's got like almost no fucking chance here. I mean, on this low of HP, top grade gunner, Moskva AP DPM is just like legitimately insane. Like legitimately insane. He basically has one chance to kill me here. If he doesn't kill me with the next salvo, I just don't die, basically. And he's shooting HE. I mean, they're not sending their best. Kuznetsov, pretty cool. Didn't save us last game, if you recall. The Shikishima, it almost saved us. The Shikishima got like some random full fuse pens. And Kuznetsov didn't save us. But this game didn't technically save us either, but, kind of made it more assured that we wouldn't die. So we basically like single-handedly won our team the game. We basically held this flank against, Fletcher, Vyazma, Des Moines, Bismarck, FDG, and Iowa. We got a little bit of damage help from the Sherman. Our Flandre was completely 100% AFK. So this game is pretty much won. But the one kind of X factor here is that their last ship alive is Yoshino. And Yoshino pens 50 with HE. We have 50 millimeter deck, and he can penetrate that with his HE. And his HE does like battleship alpha, right? So the reason why I am reversing rather than peeking out, right? The greedy player in me wants to kind of peek out and shoot at the hull. But the reason I don't want to do that is I don't really have a clue where the Yoshino is. And if I peek out well beyond this island, say I peek out like almost into the G4 square to shoot the hull, you see the Yoshino's there, right? But this was the idea at the time. If I peek out all the way here, that will give me shots on the hull faster than if I back up and then turn around to go inside. But I had no idea what the Yoshino was doing. If the Yoshino had kited out and pushed down the south side, maybe down the G or the H lines, and I peek out all the way into G4 to shoot at the hull, This Yoshino can very, very easily kill me. I mean, as long as he doesn't go like perfectly flat broadside and let me Citadel him with AP, I basically have no way to beat like a full HP Yoshino, right? I don't know what his HP is. I don't know where he is. I mean, it turns out he went inside, which is um, kind of an interesting play. Um, so, we just have to make sure we don't go flat so Hull can use the AP. We can kill him. Now I'm kind of considering the game 100% unlosable. Mostly just because our Flandra is AFK. Even if me and the DDs ended up suiciding to Yoshino, um, like this guy just will either go to A and never even spot Flandra, right? Or he'll probably. I'm being greedy, okay? I'm coping because I want to be greedy. I want 300k, okay? I want the Kraken. I want 300,000 damage. All right, sue me. I mean, it turns out yet again they're not really sending their best with this Yoshino player, because really all he has to do is park Bow in, and he can kind of like at least easily trade me. But because like you see the kind of damage he does to me, right? I mean, like big damage. I don't have a ton of HP. I'm down to one heal, but he's gonna be a nice guy, right? He's gonna, he's trying out to be captain of the nice guy squad. So he's just gonna go perfectly flat to a Moskva at like 4 kilometers and, let me blow him the fuck up with AP, which is extremely cool, and I really greatly appreciate that. So, uh, that is the. I mean, that game. Those two games were two of my better games. But we were getting a lot of damage, a lot of damage. In the Lighthouse Moskva games, I want to say we were like averaging well over 150. The day we recorded this. Base XP earning, like I said, are pretty damn low because we basically just shat on a bunch of low tier, right? Like tier 9, tier 8, tier 9, tier 9, tier 9. Uh, so the earnings are pretty low, but the damage, could have been honestly a way higher damage game if we were against higher tiers. But then again, we also might have died earlier. Kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the damage output was noticeably higher. And I just want to stress that, like, I didn't feel like I ever compromised utility usage. And I think that's just down to the nature of how Moskva plays, or at least or how I play Moskva, where I'm either on an isolated flank spamming at long range, or I'm a utility pig on a rock. And in either of those scenarios, you're not giving up any utility usage because the whole enemy team knows where you are, no matter what, for 10 minutes in a row. Um, or you're on an island, and you know what's the point of having low concealment, right? There's no point in having low concealment isolated on the flank in Moskva, spamming at 18 kilometers, because you're never going to die to anything at 18 kilometers in Moskva. You're never going to feel compelled to go dark. If you're a utility pig on a rock, you're a utility pig on a rock. Doesn't matter if you have 8 kilometer or 20 kilometer concealment, right? Um, and then that allows you to build into a couple of things. Having heavy HE when you shoot DDs is kind of nice, guys. It's kind of nice doing an extra 10% per salvo, hitting DDs for 4,500 instead of 4K. Kind of nice. Mostly it's the reload, right, at longer range. Top grade gunner kicking in at 18 kilometers. It's not super crazy when you're spamming BBs where you only pen their superstructure, nose, and ass, but it is 8% better fire starting, right? Because you have the 8% better reload. So it's definitely something I would recommend trying out. Like I said, I'm not at the Goliath, Venezia, Salem level where I think you're there's almost no reason to play those ships in my mind outside of the Lighthouse build. But I'm getting there and the reason why I say that is Salem makes no sense as a full conceal build. Goliath makes no sense as a full conceal build, and Ven makes no sense as a full conceal build, right? None of those ships even feel good in a full conceal build. Whereas Moskva has always been a great ship. It's great if you build normal, it's great if you build Lighthouse. So I can't quite say that it's objectively correct to go Lighthouse, but I'll tell you what, I'm enjoying the ship more as a Lighthouse cruiser. I'm enjoying it more. I'm getting more damage, and I feel like in the 10 or so games I've played just in the last couple of days in it, I'm not missing anything. I'm not missing anything to do with the stealth at all. And as we'll see, we're going to hop back in the port and go over the build. We're actually in many ways like almost increasing our game impact with the build. Okay, starting with equipment. I mean, this is the basically the only difference between the Lighthouse build and a standard build is slot 5. I mean, you can run ledge mod, right? You would never run range on Moskva. Please don't. Please stop killing everyone via cringe. But you're gonna run reload or ledge mod on Moskva. I kind of mentioned in my ledge mod tier list review why ledge mod Moskva is good, but it's not a pure buff. It's good, kind of a dealer's choice situation there, I would say. So we're running reload, and then on a normal cruiser, okay, on a normal lighthouse I mean, obviously radar mod, right? Aiming, main armaments, right? You have cruiser DCP. There's no reason for cold DCP mod. So it's slot 5 that's the difference. And on a normal lighthouse cruiser build, you pretty much always take steering gear mod 2. You don't ever steer in Moskva. I mean, I'll go 7 minutes in a row without touching the rudder in this thing. Almost zero value in this on the Moskva, in my opinion. And the other thing with Moskva that makes it a really bad candidate for steering gears mod, well, obviously there's what I've just mentioned, which is you don't really steer or maneuver in this thing. But you actually have a pretty good rudder shift, and you have a horrific turning circle radius. So when you buff the rudder shift from 11 down to about 8 seconds, because your turning circle radius is 1050, you don't really even turn faster. It's, if you got to wiggle to dodge a torp that's like 10 degrees off your bow, like, sure, okay, maybe you make that dodge every now and then with steering, but like, it doesn't help you actually U-turn faster really at all. And so we're running ship consumable mod 1. Really because we just don't want to take concealment. Steering gears is basically completely worthless. Torp lookout system is basically completely worthless as well. And this is giving us another 4 seconds of radar. You go from like 39 point something to 43.6. Obviously it's giving us an extra like 10 seconds of hydro. And it's also giving us a bit more healing. The heals are up to about 13.5k per heal. You have 4 of them. You know, that's rough math. What, 54,000 HP worth of healing, roughly? You get about 5k from the Koozie heal. So you're at almost 60,000 HP of healing. We're putting that on top of 73,000 hit points base. So, I mean, people, if you're playing smart and you're not getting focused down too early, you got to consistently hit, they got to hit you for 130k or so damage to kill you. So you're very survivable. So we're kind of building into the radar and into the healing just a bit, right? We're getting an extra like 1350 HP back per heal, which isn't a lot, but it's something. It's not like this skill is insane. It's just like, to me, it's the no-brainer choice if you want to nerf concealment by not running Conceal Mod 1, right? And then it's a mostly totally standard Lighthouse cruiser build. I would say the one main choice in a lot of Lighthouse builds is, do you take Survivability Expert? In a CV free game or something, this can be good. However, I will say the 4.8A skill is kind of god tier overall. And I think it does make a lot of sense to drop Survivability Expert and a 1-point skill to run the 4.8A skill. It is World of Warplanes, like I've said many times. That's a super viable alternative. You're already so hard to kill anyway, right? Do you really miss the 4,500 HP? I don't know. It's debatable. There are definitely margins where it keeps you alive versus it doesn't, but we're running this as our 2-point for, the extra radar, obviously. Gun feeder on Moskva, I think, is a must. You could definitely debate the merits of Last Stand on Moskva. I would say, personally, if I'm going to run the 4.8 skill, I would probably drop Last Stand. The ship doesn't maneuver around a lot. It's not like you're going to be caught in a turn with your rudder out, kind of a deal. And Kuznetsov has the improved reload on consumables. And you can get the consumable reload like really good. I'm not running it, but like if you run the flag and that captain skill combined, 102.5 seconds on your radar. And then obviously that's like you run the 4.8 skill and that gets cut in half. So I mean, if I like an Utrecht is plane spamming you, it's like you can be getting the radar back realistically in like sub 1 minute at times, which is pretty mega. I would say probably overall 4.8 skill is worth more than survivability. I definitely run superintendent no matter what because the HP this gives you is more, and then obviously an extra radar, extra hydro. You will use them on Moskva, right? Because 12 cam radar. So I would actually probably almost recommend grabbing 4.8 skill over survivability expert. Any planes in your lobby, a CV goes for you with one squadron, and this skill probably was more valuable than that skill, right? Um, it's a lot of fun. Lighthouse Moskva is a good time. It's very enjoyable. Um, those two games we looked at obviously had no sub, no carrier, but like realistically, the math on that to me doesn't change hardly at all. I mean, yes, you're nerfing your air and therefore your periscope depths conceal, but like Moskva's air detect is and sub detect is kind of shit anyway. Yeah, you're nerfing it by like a couple kilometers, but like I said, my overall takeaway is because I haven't played Lighthouse Moskva in a while. I played it a bit, a couple years ago. Haven't played it in a while. My take is I just don't feel like I'm giving up any ability to use my radar utility. And in about half the games, I'm just giving myself a raw 18% HE buff, DPM buff. And in another half of my games, I'm not really making use of the top grade gunner effect anyway as a utility pig on a rock. But then I do have a bit more HE damage, and since I'm giving up those skills, I'm taking, extra radar duration. It's kind of a wash. But it's definitely something, I would recommend going with. Kind of the one major downside is none of the other Russian cruisers really make sense. Petro is mostly an AP spammer because of how nuts the AP is. I mean, you'll shoot HE in Petro, but like same thing with Stalin, right? So buffing the HE DPM on those ships is a little suspect. I have been playing a Lighthouse Smolensk. It's kind of a vibe. It is kind of a vibe. It's actually not bad. But like Nevsky, it just has like such a shit hull. Um, Stalingrad burns forever. Petro is more AP focus. That's kind of the major downside of the Lighthouse build is it's not really remotely optimal on any of the other tier 10 Russian cruisers. Um, but on Moskva, dude, it fucks. It really does fuck. That'll do it for our little Lighthouse Moskva inspection. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.